This is J. Krishnamurti's 9th public talk in Saanen, 1964.
I would like to talk about something this morning which may be rather foreign to most people. It seems to me it's one of the most important things in life because it clarifies the mind, empties the mind of every experience and thought, so that it is made new, fresh, innocent. And it is only the innocent mind in its freedom that can discover what is true. And this discovery is not a state of permanency or a mind that has achieved a result and remains there. It's a mind that is utterly being free, is capable of renewing itself without effort. And because it is of such immense significance that most of us who live so very superficially with knowledge and information feel that in itself knowledge and information are sufficient. But the nature of meditation, not contemplation, not prayer, but the mind that is in a state of meditation, must understand, or rather to come by it naturally, easily, without effort, must understand the superficial mind, the everyday mind, the mind that is so easily satisfied with information, with acquiring knowledge and accumulating technological capacity, so that it is able to live in this world rather superficially, specialized along a particular line, and be content with whatever psychological or physiological problems arise, to live at that level. So it seems to me that it is very important to understand how very superficial the mind as it is now, and whether it is possible to go beyond it. We see that the more one has information, and greater capacity in so-called daily life. And one must have that capacity, that knowledge, that information. That's obvious and that's necessary. Because we cannot go back to the ancient times or put away all machinery and science. It's like those religious people who try to go back to old tradition, to old philosophy, to old concepts and formulas. and thereby destroy themselves and the world in which they live. But science, mathematics, all the technological knowledge available for man, it is absolutely necessary. But to live in that world of technology and knowledge and information makes the mind only superficial. And most of us are content to live in that superficiality. And because that knowledge, technology and information gives us more money, more comfort, more well-being and so-called freedom, the more it is respected by a degrading, disintegrating society. And a mind which would go very deeply must understand the limitation of technology, knowledge and information and leave it there. See the limitation and be free of that limitation. Then, how is a mind which is obviously very, very superficial? As one observes all the activities, all our emotions, all our neurological reactions are obviously very superficial on the outside, on the surface. And from the surface, we try to find out the depth. From the surface, we try to go deeper and deeper and deeper. Because for most of us, living on the surface, one soon gets rather tired of it. The more you are intelligent, the more you are intellectual, the more passionate. The superficiality of life is rather tiresome, boring. There's not great significance. So, the superficial mind tries to find the purpose of life, tries to find out a formula that will give a purpose. Say, what is the aim of life? What is the purpose of life? And trying to live according to a concept which it has conceived as the purpose is still superficial. So one must see this very clearly. Because what we are doing this morning is to remove layer after layer of superficiality, so that one can go to the origin, to the very depth of things. And this superficiality is also sought through experience. It perpetuates this superficiality, perpetuates itself through experience. And this is very important to understand, the whole significance of experience. First, one sees how technology, specialization of any nature makes the mind narrow, petty, limited, which is the very essence of the bourgeois. Then the mind, being superficial, seeks significance of life, and therefore projects that which is pleasing, profitable, pleasure, and conforms to that pattern, which gives it a certain sensation, a purpose, a drive in existence. And also, we have to understand very deeply this thing called experience. Because leading a very superficial life, we're always seeking more and more experiences, wider, deeper. That's why people take mescaline, go to churches, go to the moon, try LSD 25, lysergic acid, and various forms of drugs to give it a new kick, a new stimulation, a new sensation. And the mind tries to seek experience through art, through music, through every form of expression, newer, fresher. So what we are trying to understand is that a mind that would find itself at great depth, find itself, not bring about that state, which you cannot, but to find itself, it is necessary to understand all these things. We are using the word understanding, not merely the intellectual comprehension, the verbal communication, but rather the mind that sees the truth of the matter and the immediate perception gives it understanding, not argumentation, not the investigation of the truth of opinions, which does not bring about understanding, but rather the sensitivity, the awareness, the quality of hesitancy, tentativeness, which brings to the mind as that quality of not only neurological sensitivity, but also an apprehension, to apprehend quickly. So, we must understand the nature of experience, because we all want new experiences. We are tired of the old, the things that have brought us pain, the things that have caused us sorrow, the routine, the rituals of churches, the rituals of state worship. One is fed up with all that, tired, exhausted by it. So one wants more experience along different lines, at different levels and depths. So it is necessary to understand the nature of experience. Because it's only the mind that is without experience, that does not seek experience, that is in a state of complete profundity. Experience is the result or the outcome of a challenge and a response. The response being adequate or inadequate. That adequacy or inadequacy depending on the background, on the conditioning. And we translate according to that background, to that conditioning, every challenge and the response of that conditioning is to not only to experience, to go through that thing, through that particular form of challenge, but retain, leave a residue from that experience, which we call knowledge. We go through a certain experience. For a minute or for a day or for a year, sustain it. And as we go through it, it leaves certain sediment. The sediment is memory. The mind then operates as a sieve through which the experience goes through and leaves certain sediment. That sediment is memory. And with that memory, with that residue, the next experience is met. So each experience, however wide, however deep, however potential, however interesting, vital, leaves sediment. And each experience only strengthens the limitations, the memories of that of every sediment. Please, you are not accepting an opinion. You are not believing what is being said. This is actually what takes place if you observe yourself. So you are watching yourself in operation. The speaker is operating and you are watching yourself. So there is nothing to believe. You are not being hypnotized to believe this or that. So every experience, does not matter what it is, leaves the sediment which becomes the past. And with that sediment, and in that sediment we live. That remains is the me, is the whole structure of self-centered activity. And seeing the nature of this self-centered activity, we want still more experience, still wider experience, or demand how to break through this limitation in order to find something greater. But it is still the activity of the accumulated or inherited sediment and remains of experiences, whether it be of a day, of a minute, or of 10,000 or 2 million years. This one has to see very clearly. As you are aware that you are hungry, nobody needs to argue about it. Perhaps you can then discuss the nature of food when you are hungry. But it is your own experience when you are hungry. Similarly, this must be seen very clearly. That every experience of affection, of sympathy, of pride, of jealousy, of an inspired moment, of an idea, a thought, leaves a mark, and the constant repetition and the overlaying of that mark, of that sediment, is the whole process of our thinking and of our being. And any activity from there must inevitably, at whatever level, be superficial. And a mind that inquires into the possibility of an originality, a state or a world in which there is no contamination, must understand this process of experience. Then the question then arises, is it possible to be free of the activity of this superficiality with its self-centered activity, without effort, without making it into a problem, without trying to dissolve it? Because again that becomes a superficial reaction. I hope I am making the question clear. Because if it is not clear, what is going to be talked about presently will be totally unclear. Now, the word meditation obviously means to think about, to ponder upon, to investigate without or with the process of thinking, or the state of mind that is contemplative. Now that word has extraordinary significance in the East. It has very little meaning in this world, in this part of the world. One has written a great deal about it. And there are many schools, many methods, many systems which advocate certain types of meditation. Meditation is none of these things. It is meditation is the emptying of the mind completely and totally. And one cannot empty the mind forcibly, according to any method, according to any system or school. So again one must see the utter fallacy of any system. The pursuit of a system is the pursuit of experience and to achieve a further experience or the ultimate experience. So when one understands the nature of experience, then you brush all this aside with one sweep, finished, forever. So that your mind never follows anybody, pursues no experience, no vision. All visions, all heightened sensitivity is the self-centered activity, either through drug, through discipline, through rituals, through worship, through prayer. So, if you have gone during these talks, I have come to this point, and I hope some of you have. After all, you have heard the speaker, unfortunately, for so many years now. You must have come to a certain point when you have reached a block, a certain point where you can't go any further, where you understand all that's been discussed, said quickly and briefly, and penetrated through it. So our question then is, how is a mind which through tradition, through time, through memory, through experience, has been made superficial? How is such a mind to free itself from this superficiality, so that it is so completely awake that every experience has no meaning anymore? You understand? When that which is completely alive, alight, full of light, it doesn't demand more light. It is light itself. And every influence, every penetration into that light, it can burn itself, burn away, and keep always clear, immaculate, innocent. Because it's only the clear mind, the innocent mind, that can see something that is beyond the measure of time. So how is this to come about? Have I made my question clear? It is not my question. It is everybody's question, or it should be everybody's question. So I am not imposing my question onto you. If I impose this question onto you, then you would make a problem of it. Then you would say, how am I to do it? But if it is your own perception, because you have lived, you have watched, you have seen what the world is, you have seen yourself in operation, you have read, so much, being informed so much, you have progressed, you have acquired tremendous knowledge. You see all this. You see very clever people with computer minds, professors that can reel off infinite knowledge. And met theologians who have fixed idea around which they build marvelous theories. So when you become aware of all this, you must, and probably have inevitably asked yourself, how is the mind, which is a slave of time and which is the product of time of the past, how is that mind to put away all this easily, without effort, without any directive, without any motive, so that it finds itself at the original fountain of life? How would you, when that question is put to yourself or is put to you by another, how do you answer it? Do listen to me. How do you answer it? Don't answer me, but just listen to me. When that question is put to you, it's an immense question. It is not just a clever, rhetorical question which can quickly answer or brush it off. It is of tremendous significance, of immense value. Not the value of a petty little, shallow little mind, but the value of a mind. The value of that question is to a mind that has seen all this, searched out all this, gone through all the various stupid organized religions, brushed it all aside. With their priests, with their gurus, with their temples, churches, rituals, incense, threw it all away. And you have come to a point when you have to ask yourself, how is it possible to go beyond? What do you do when you have an immense problem? What do you do when something tremendously in the immediate happens? Now, either the incident, the happening, the experience is so tremendous, so vital, so demanding that it completely absorbs you. So your mind is taken over by that tremendous thing. And so the mind becomes quiet because that thing is so potent, so vital, so dynamic, that your mind gives in and it is taken over. That's one form of silence. Isn't it? Like a child with a very interesting toy. The toy has become so extraordinarily interesting that he is no longer mischievous. He is no longer running about. The toy has become important. The toy has absorbed him. The toy makes him, forces him to concentrate. And so, with the grown-ups too, it is the same thing. When confronted with a great issue, The mind, not comprehending the whole significance of it, gives itself over to that and becomes numb, shocked, paralyzed. And in that moment it is fleetingly silent, which most of us have experienced. Then there is the silence of the mind when the problem is looked at with complete concentration. When there is no distraction but complete concentration, when the mind has no other thought, no other interest, doesn't look anywhere but completely watching that thing. And an intensification of attention, of concentration, to the exclusion of everything else. In that concentration there is effort, there is the vitality, the demand, the urgency. And that also produces a certain quality of silence. Now there is a third, which has nothing whatsoever to do with the true silence which most of us experience at odd moments. The mind is not absorbed by the toy, by the problem. Because that merely then is an escape. By the word God, the images, the symbols which take over the mind. That is a deep escape, a flight from the actual. And in that flight there is a certain quality of silence, which is the product of a mind that demands to sacrifice itself, to forget itself in order to identify itself with something. When there is complete identification, as the neurotic identifies himself with a belief, then he is perfectly quiet. But he is a neurotic state. This demand to identify oneself with the country, with an idea, with a symbol, with a race, with a purpose, with all that is a neurotic state, which most religious people are in. All religious people, because they have identified with themselves, with the Savior, with the Master, with this and with that. So that gives them a tremendous release. And this release brings them a certain beatific attitude towards life, which is a totally neurotic attitude. Then there is the mind that has learned to concentrate. Never to look beyond that which is in front. What is in front is the idea, is the image, is the symbol, a projected, conditioned response. And on that it concentrates. Now what takes place in that concentration? concentration is effort. And all effort is resistance. Like building a defensive wall round yourself so that you can look through a little hole at that thing. A fortress. So that you are never attacked. You are never uncertain, never open, but always living within this sense of concentration, a sense of devoted, inspired pursuit of something. In that there is extraordinary sense of vitality, drive, and all you can do extraordinary work, go to the slums, work in the desert, live with people, but it is still born from the self-centered activity of a mind that concentrates and to the exclusion of everything else. And that also gives to the mind a certain quality of peace, a quality of silence. Now what we are talking about as silence has nothing whatsoever to do with these neurotic states. And that's where our difficulty lies. Because unfortunately, most of us are neurotic. I am saying this most politely. But to understand what we are talking about, which is neither concentration, which is neither being absorbed by the state, by the God, by a symbol, by your savior or your master, or a belief or an idea. One must completely be free of this neurotic state. Because in this there is no self-pity, there is no pursuit, there is no projection, there are no visions, and there is no concentration. When you have understood the absorption, the concentration, and also when you have understood the whole process of thinking and the self-centered activity, in observing, in looking, in watching, out of that comes an extraordinary sense of pliable discipline. And that discipline you must have, which is not a defensive, reactionary discipline. In that discipline there is no imitation, conformity, effort. But you must have that discipline. Because that very observation of all the movement of thought, the desire, the demand for experiences, the self-identifying process with something, merely to observe it, to understand it, demands naturally an ease of discipline in freedom. So with that discipline, not sitting cross-legged or lying and all this stupid childish stuff. Out of that discipline of understanding, Perhaps it's not that word itself, because for most of us, discipline means conformity. Like a soldier disciplining himself for the rest of 20 years, his mind is finished. Out of this understanding comes that peculiar quality of immediate awareness and perception. And out of this attention, and in this attention there is virtue. That is the only virtue. The social morality, the character that is developed as a resistance against or with society, with all its moralities and ethics, is not virtue at all. What is virtue is the understanding of this whole structure of man which man has built around himself, and understanding this self-sacrificing identification and control. Out of that comes attention, and in that attention only there is virtue, and every other form of virtue is not virtue. So that you must have a virtuous mind, not a mind that has conformed to the pattern of society. The communist or the capitalist or the social or the religious. Because without virtue, there is no freedom. The virtue of which we are speaking about. That virtue is not cultivated. Like humility, it cannot be cultivated any more than you can cultivate that thing that we call love. But when there is this attention, there is virtue and there is love. And out of this attention comes total silence, not only at the superficial level of the conscious mind, but also at the level of the unconscious. Both the conscious and the unconscious are really quite trivial. And the perception of that triviality makes the mind free from the past and from the present. And therefore it is capable of giving its whole attention to the present. And out of this attention there comes silence. And it is the silence in which the mind is no longer experiencing. Because there is nothing more to experience. All experiences has come to an end. Because it is so completely, totally awake and is a light to itself. And out of this silence, and because it is silence, it is peaceful. Not the politician's peace, nor the peace between two walls. And that peace is not a reaction. And when the mind is completely quiet, still, then it can proceed. The movement of stillness is entirely different from the movement of activity, of self-centered being. That Movement is creation. And when the mind can live with that, then it knows death and love, and it can then live in a state, living in this world and yet be free of the world. Do you want to ask any questions?
Yes, sir, I wish to.
Delighted, sir.
I yearn for this silence, but I find that my attempts to attain are more pitiful as time goes by, and I'm less able to attain.
The gentleman says he yearns for this silence, and the more he makes attempts, the more pitiful they become. First of all, you can't yearn for this silence. You don't know anything about it. Even if you knew about it, it is not so. What you know is not what is. So you have to be very careful never to say, I know. Sir, look. When you know, you recognize. I recognize you because I met you yesterday. And therefore, I say I know you. I've experienced what you have said, your being. So what I know is already the past, and therefore from the past, from yesterday I can recognize. This silence cannot be recognized. There is no process of recognition whatsoever. That's the first thing to understand. To understand this recognizing business. To recognize you must have already experienced, already known, or already read, or somebody must have told you. And because we yearn for that because our life is so shallow, empty, dull, stupid. We want to escape from this ugly business. But unfortunately, we can't escape from it. We have to understand it. And to understand something, you must have tremendous love, affection for it. You mustn't kick it. You mustn't run away from it. You must understand it. If you would understand a child, you can't compare it with its elder brother or compel him or force him. You must look at him, watch him with great care, with tenderness, with affection, with everything that you have. Similarly, we must understand this petty thing called life with all its travail, misery, sorrow, conflict, jealousy. We must understand it. And out of this understanding comes a certain quality of peace which you cannot grope after. You know, there is a lovely story of a disciple going to the master, and there is the master sitting in the garden, in a beautiful, quiet, watered garden. And the disciple comes and sits beside him, and not quite in front of him, because to sit in front of him directly is not very respectful. Therefore he sits by the side of him and crosses his legs and closes his eyes. And so the master asks, "My friend, what are you doing?" And the disciple says, "Master, I am trying to reach the consciousness of the Buddha." And closes his eyes again. Presently, the master picks up 2 pieces of rock and begins to rub them. And they make a lot of noise. So the disciple comes down from his great height and says, "Master, what are you doing?" So the master says, "I am rubbing these 2 rocks so as to make one of them into a mirror." And the disciple says, "Master, you can rub the 2 pieces of rock for 1,000,000 years, you will never do it." So the master smiles and says, "My friend, you can sit like that for the next 10,000,000 years and you will never come." And that's what we're all doing. We're all taking postures. We're all wanting something, groping after, searching, demanding, struggling, discipline, forcing. But I'm afraid none of these things will open the door. What will open the door is to understand without effort, to look, to observe with affection, with love. And you cannot have love because you are not humble. Humility is only possible when you don't want a thing from the gods or from a human being.